Good afternoon, gentlemen. I hope you guys are enjoying your lunch and hope the food is as quality as I know it probably is, because I haven't heard any noise yet from anybody talking. We're here today because we have several individuals. I'll get them go down the line and introduce themselves besides myself. Community leaders and attorneys and criminal, and I'll let them go into those details. But what we're all here to discuss is, as you can see the topic, where has Mayberry gone? But in that, what we're trying to do is structure and let everybody understand and try to lift up these communities that need filling we'll never give back to Mayberry, it's gone. But what do we need to do as a team and as Christian leaders and houses of worship to build that back up? And where the voids are that we need to support. Those are the type of things that we'll be going through. So, and my name is PC Hecker. I'm actually the Director of Operations of HPI CTA as well as HPI Unified. And we're here as community outreach and trying to build and train and lift up our community. That's part of our vision and our goals. Steve?
I'm Steve Franklin. I'm the Director of Operations here at Journey Christian Church, retired Marine, a little over 30 years active duty. Spent 7 years in the consulting world up in the North Virginia area after that, and have been on staff here since 2017, so almost 5 years on staff as Director of Operations.
My name is Gilbert Ambler. I'm a defense attorney. I practice throughout Virginia and Pennsylvania. Most of my focus as a practice is on firearms-related cases, so involving everything from representing gun stores that have had issues with ATF to self-defense cases involving weapons. And so it's a diverse practice, but all fairly narrowly focused on something involving weapons.
I'm Chris Winslow. I'm chairman of the Chesterfield County Board of Supervisors. Here we have 365,000 people. We just got our census numbers back. I am also an attorney, and I practice bankruptcy law and personal injury. So I bring, I guess, those eyes to this conversation as well. Recently in Chesterfield memory, we had a school safety task force of which I was a member. So I believed I could lend some of that discussion and some of the things we've learned to this today, and glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Clark, and I run a private security firm out of Arlington, Virginia. Prior to that, I just recently, in 2020, retired from the FBI after 30 years as a special agent. During that time, I was assigned a variety of field offices and overseas. I was a operator and assistant team leader for the FBI's Atlanta SWAT team for 10 years. And most recently assigned to the New York office on one of the best teams, the New York Joint Terrorism Task Force. I come wanting to participate and asking you for your participation because this is your seminar, so we are here to answer your questions and dialogue with you, and want to talk about this wonderful team that PC and Steve has put together, and the very interesting topic and timely topic of welcoming while securing.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and what I was bringing up before, is one of the things that's going on is demographic changes. And houses of worship, as well as other community support systems, are out there. But at the same time, it's a war that we're doing because it's also the recruiting center for gangs, violence, drug interdictions, those type of things. So we've got to blend. And at that time, we are targets because of that. So that's one of the subjects I would like each one of us to sort of express something on, then ask you guys for questions on that front, first and foremost. So, anybody want to start?
Sure. Certainly, as the census numbers have just come out, I'm a little fresh on sort of where we are in Chesterfield County with some different demographic information, and where we've been and where we're going. Some trends that took place prior to the pandemic, was just talking with these gentlemen up here about this. We actually had a poverty rate in Chesterfield County that was going down. And that is, I think, a result of a lot of different and strong policies that are pushing people toward financial independence when they come see us at social services, or when they come into contact with a police officer, or when they come into contact with mental health. We try to drive a one-stop shop, if you will, for helping people, and while we have them in person a lot of times. same-day access, if you will, to all of it. So where we're headed, though, of course, the pandemic has presented some challenges for every single locality. We are no different here. And it's, I think, made it more difficult for people who were already struggling in many ways. People who were on the borderline of struggling are now struggling, and those who may not have thought they would have been struggling are now struggling. So we, I think, in conjunction with the state and federal programs, have been looking at different ways over the last 2 years to spend one-time money to have long-lasting impacts in some of these areas. As it relates to school safety, and I would say also houses of worship safety, because I think there's a strong correlation to buildings that we would all think are untouchable and should be untouchable. You wouldn't think that these would be targets, of course, because we all have grown up like we have and been in the church community like we have. I think there's a lot of parallel there. And so it's interesting to note that during the pandemic, we've had a little bit of a relaxation and some time to catch up from a jurisdiction standpoint in securing the physical facilities in ways that we've never had to think about, to consider cameras and install multiple angles at facilities and multiple ways to get into those cameras at any given point in time, and to assist our police department and our 911 center to be able to get access when they need it, where they need it, without interruption. So we have really used the last 2 years as an opportunity to secure facilities in the county. And it's a great opportunity now for, I think, churches to do the same. And you know, from a demographic standpoint, we are, to get back to the original question, I think, getting to a more diverse Chesterfield in many ways. When you look at racial statistics, I think we're 65% Caucasian, about 25% African American, and the Latino population is really where we've seen a lot of growth, as I'm sure is reflected in your congregations and perhaps where you're from. So we, you know, with each of those communities comes histories and languages and cultures that we can all come together on, because we're all talking about the Word of God here. And so it's you know, emphasizing those ties that bind, looking for ways to educate all of us on securing these facilities and the importance of that, not only for our families and our children, but for the community. Because when something happens, as we know, it just doesn't happen in one place. That impact is felt throughout the community.
You know, and I think you talked a little bit about the economic trends and how the economic trends are affecting, especially with the pandemic, how the economic trends have affected everyone. One of the other sort of maybe more unseen effects of the pandemic has been the emotional effect of the pandemic. And it's something that has a tremendous effect on what you need to be expecting, on what houses of worship need to be expecting, on what people in their own private homes need to be expecting, as far as what violence and what evil might lurk out there. Because people that have been maybe a little bit unstable, they might not have had access to their regular care. They may have been forced from going to receive treatment and receive care in person. It may have been pushed into an online setting, and sometimes internet doesn't work. Sometimes it's just not effective talking to somebody through a camera. I know personally, I struggle, you know, with Zoom hearings and things like that. I don't get as much out of it. Yeah, absolutely. You know? But for somebody who's at the breaking point and needs essential care and treatment for their mental health, we don't know that they're effectively receiving it right now. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to translate, that whole idea is going to translate into more people reaching what we would call their breaking point. And you see this in sort of really, really ugly instances of violence that flare up, where people, and you often hear people say, you know, I would have never guessed, I would have never thought that person would do that. And I think what's going on is people are getting pushed further and further because they're losing loved ones. Their loved ones that are alive, over the past couple of years, maybe they haven't seen them as regularly as they would have liked. Maybe they've had to spend holidays, Christmases, Thanksgivings apart. Maybe they've been told that they can't attend concerts that they looked forward to, sporting events. And this sort of sounds silly that someone would reach a breaking point because they can't attend a sporting event. But some people that are close to the edge, that type of stuff is essential to their mental health, or it's them feeling like they've got a reason to live and something to look forwards to. And when you start taking that stuff away, I don't think that as a country or even as a world that we have accurately calculated the costs of this pandemic and what it's done. Because we can sort of start putting numbers on the financial costs, on how many businesses get shut down, how many people, but what we're not talking about is the cost to people's mental health of this pandemic. And this is something that schools, as you talked about, houses of worship, some of these areas that in the past you didn't have to worry about and no one would think of harming people there. It's something where these sometimes soft targets have to be more and more concerned with what they might be facing. And I think this translates into a shift in how people start training. People that are carrying firearms, people that are taking firearms training, people that are taking training with less than lethal, they need to start shifting and changing the type of threat that they're envisioning. Because in the past, it may have been worrying about somebody trying to mug them in a dark alley. And could they stop somebody who was trying to cut them to take their wallet off them? And I'm not saying that's not a concern. Obviously, that is still a concern. But I think that there has been a large-scale shift in what people that are training start thinking about. Because no longer are you thinking about that one-on-one attacker that's a close-up attack. And for the sake of clarity, the vast majority of self-defense incidents that I see are still one-on-one attacks close up. But if you're going to train and if you're going to be prepared, I think you need to start envisioning what other threats are out there. And some of the other threats that are out there are people that have reached that breaking point. They've got nothing to live for, and for whatever reason, they feel wronged by society because society's taken away things that they love and things that they care about. And they decide to go out while hurting other people. And that's a very, very different type of threat than dealing with that one-on-one close-up attacker who's trying to use a knife to get your wallet. Now we're starting to think about targets that are further away. We're starting to think about threats that there's more distance, there's more, and obviously with distance comes more opportunity for mistakes for people that are defending themselves. And those mistakes can have tremendous consequences. So it's something that as you take training and as you think about training, you should be thinking about what exactly am I training for? And how do I train for that? So that if I am ever confronted with that very, very ugly threat, I can do the best job possible responding.
And that's great points. And you see it in the papers. You read about it every day. Things are getting more and more stressful out there for normal people. So people didn't have to think about these things, 15, 20, 30 years. They would go into a house of worship or a school and they would be completely feeling safe and kind of operating in a level of unawareness about any kind of threat or situational awareness regarding any type of bad thing that's going to happen. Because other folks, the government, the police, the first responders, would take care of it. That was the go-to. Something happens, you call the police or the first responders, and they come and they respond. Now, it's, what makes this kind of training so important is we're at a point where citizen self-reliance is becoming more and more important. And especially in venues where the majority of the people are coming and want to feel safe, it's very important just to have an understanding and a basic mindset of what you should do. And you can have advanced safety teams like PC and Steve have set up at this institution, or you can have just a relative kind of making people aware of, so they're not completely surprised by a critical event. And that could be not just an active shooter, it could be a heart attack, it could be a missing child, it could be all sorts of things that most people don't think about at all because they truly believe that others are going to handle it. So having that little bit of situational awareness really helps. So when you're faced with a situation, it's not the first time that your brain is kind of processing that. And that's why this is very important.
And going off that point, I would say that even on a personal level, this affects me because when I was growing up and going to church, I was focused on what the message was that day. And now I find myself glancing back at the doors every time the door opens because I'm wondering who's coming in. And I want to, at least sort of have that awareness you're talking about and be aware of who just walked into the church, especially, 15 minutes late.
Yeah.
And that's not to shame them for being late to service. That's because more and more you start
Maybe
worrying.
a little bit.
Well, maybe a little bit. It's because more and more you worry about, is there a threat coming in behind me? And it's a real shame that you have to think that way. I mean, it's terrible that in the house of the Lord you need to be worried about whether someone just came in to hurt you. But I have a strong suspicion that if I feel that when I'm sitting in church, that many others feel that way as well.
And Steve, you made the perfect point this morning. I mean, it's a balance, right?
It is.
That's what the safety team
Yeah.
should be doing, so others don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, great point. Great points, great discussion. And that's exactly right. We don't want to get our churches so locked down to be secure that we stop welcoming people. Because, as I said earlier this morning, the whole purpose behind having a church is for people to meet Jesus Christ and identify with him as Savior. That's why we do what we do. And like I've said to the team, I said this morning in another class, what we do here as church safety teams has eternal consequences. People, if they don't feel safe when they walk in, they may not come back. We may not get a chance to talk to them again. So everything we do as a safety team is focused on obviously keeping people safe who walk through our doors, but also having a balance of not making it so safe that no one wants to come in. And we talk about the fact that the aspect of welcoming starts in the parking lot. People get their first impression when they come around the corner of our parking lot over there and see our building for the first time. How does it look? Does it look okay? Is there a mob of people? Is it whatever? And they're thinking about that. I commented earlier this morning, as has been said, in 2004, when I first came to Journey, what was then Countryside Christian Church, now Journey Christian Church, I never thought about security. I walked in, was welcomed. It was the most welcoming place I'd ever been, still is, and thought, this is where we want to end up going after moving down here from Northern Virginia. And so started that, and then gradually, as we've seen, like the title of this session says, where has Mayberry gone? It's gone, folks. It's gone. We're in a different demographic. We're in a different time. And as was commented, the mental health aspect of people is getting ramped up, not just because of the tough times, but because of the combination of the pandemic. You calculate the financial cost of people losing their jobs, losing their businesses. But what about the emotional toll on them not being able to provide for their families? A single mom who's out of work now because her job went away, because that business shut down. What's she going to do? We had a young man come to the door earlier this week, wanting something as simple as a way to charge his cell phone. Can I get a cable to charge my cell phone? We didn't have one. We said, come on in, we'll see if we can find something to make it work for you, if you get your phone charged. We didn't have something to give him, so he was upset. He uttered some not nice words to our reception, to our executive assistant who was downstairs, and our finance person who was downstairs trying to help him out, went out and slammed the door. And I'm like, all that over a cord to charge your phone? That's just not right. But yet, that's what we face on a daily basis here, and every house of worship faces that. More and more people are coming to their house of worship, to their church to say, I'm losing my mind. I need counseling. Maybe not, that might be too strong a word, but I am really struggling mental health-wise. I want to get some help. Can you point me in the direction of someone who can help counsel me? And so that's one of the things we got to be prepared for and be able to help people when they come through our doors, because we never know what we're going to face. Gilbert, you said the same thing. When that door opens, I'm not physically part of the safety team, but they fall under my responsibility here at Journey. But I tell you what, anytime a door opens, I'm watching because I want to know who's coming in. We got a great safety team here at Journey, I'll tell you what. But it is one of those things of just being able to say, what can we do? How can we balance what we're doing as to keep people safe, but yet maintaining that welcoming environment so they want to come in and we get a chance to minister to them, because that's really the most important thing we do, is minister to the people who come through our doors to lead them to Jesus Christ.
I've had experiences on the Christian counseling side as well as in here at Journey, to where I've had people come up to me looking for, they're in distress. They don't know how to deal with something and what we're dealing with. And I sit there and I talk them through it. They're just looking for a sounding board. They're looking for that personal interaction that they're not getting anymore. That's something that as our communities, we need to be lifting up. Part of that is we have a society right this second, here as well as across the country, where they're going from what I call a state of green to where they really don't recognize what's going on that's causing it, and they're just walking around not really obvious, to where they're jumping the yellow stage, which is what we try to teach people to go to a state of red, to where they're living in fear. Their anxiety, it's letting them overwhelm them, so they're eating it up. And we need to bring it back down to get people to where we can have encouragement and lift them. And our houses of worship are one of the main focal points that build that up. That is a central point. And then, for example, we're partnering with the food bank to lift up and serve them through food, because people are out there hungry. If you've been here, if you've seen one of these collection centers, it's needed. It's a huge thing. All of these community outreaches that we're providing are all things to help lift people up. But on the mental side, we need to lift that side. We need to teach them. For example, I'm not going into the political side of the discussion, but mask, for example, 80% of communication is nonverbal. It's your body language. How much of that is through your facial expressions? A very large portion of it. That being the case, when you're wearing a mask, are you losing that emotional tie? It's no different than people with cell phones. It's just another step in the direction of society degrading to a non-personal level. You don't have that facial communication. You don't have that structure. You don't have that hug that person might need to lift them up. You don't have that.
Are you
emotional
asking for that now?
I'll give him a hug.
So that's where those type of things are important things. I've got people, here I am, people know I'm on the safety team here when I'm here. They walk up, they give me a hug. There's a guy came in that I hadn't seen in 30 years. He walked up and gave me a hug. He says, "How you doing?" And I didn't recognize him to begin with. I was like, "Oh, I'm doing fine." But just the fact that happened, it's things that are like that are encouragement throughout our society that we need to lift up as a whole. Those are all very important factors. Every point that all of us have made build into that. And part of what this whole conference is about on the safety and training side is dealing with the mental aspects as well as the more likely scenarios, not just the first person shooter or the active shooter situation. We are trying to train as overall on a spiritual level as well as a safety level.
Churches historically have been a gathering place where people came together. That was part of the relationship of the community. As churches have gotten larger, that community might have gotten larger, but in this day and age of Zoom and broadcasting messages via live stream, we've had people say, "Why do I need to go back to church?" Then they come back and they say, "Oh, I understand now what I've been missing." And that aspect of just being able to walk in and shake somebody's hand, give them a hug, as PC said, and look at them face to face. Church via Zoom is functional and it's worked in many cases, but people are not getting the experience they need, the face-to-face interaction, when they're just doing it on screens. And if that's what they choose to do, I'm glad that's available for them. I'm glad we make it available for the people who watch Journey Online every week. That's great. But the not being able to get that physical contact with people, not being able to get that hug, not being able to talk to somebody out in their lobby and say, "How you doing? What's going on?" face to face. Even if you got a mask on. Want to wear a mask, Journey? Great, we don't care. Don't want to wear a mask? Don't care. Come on in. We want you here. But that face-to-face aspect of being able to say, "What's going on?" and download a little bit. Verbal processing is huge. And we've lost some of that. And we get people coming in almost every Sunday. Say, "I've been watching online for 18 months. First time I've been back in the building, or first time I've been in your building. It's good to be here."
I'm going to tack on just one other point, because all of this has been so good. Obviously, I deal with my constituents and constituents across the county on various issues. One of the two things that we all need to do as men, as Christians, as people who are concerned about our community is model emotional intelligence, model emotional moderation at times, and model critical thinking. We have a political environment right now, I'll just tell it like it is, that is either A or B, when most of the time, if people took the time to do the research and to see, it's not either of those options. It's actually in the middle, and all of the facts that you've been given, if you're on A side or B side, are not complete, not correct, and you don't have the whole picture. So I'll just put a period on that.
And I think that's great point. I think that, reminds me of a couple words, and the words being grace, acceptance, and love. And I think the mask debate is a great example. And I'll tell you, I don't want to go down on picking sides on the mask debate because A, I'm not a doctor and I flat out don't know. What I do know is that if you feel very strongly one way or the other, you're going to come across people who have counter points and views that run counter to your view, and they probably have valid reasons and valid fears for the reason that they feel the way that they do. If you strongly believe everyone should wear masks, then PC's comment about that facial interaction and the nonverbal communication is something that is worth thinking about and worth considering. Or if you strongly feel that no one needs to wear a mask, you should take time to think and to accept and to love your neighbor who feels that they do need to wear a mask, because we don't know what they have going on. And this comes back to not knowing the stresses and the outside stressors on people's lives. You don't know whether they've got family members that are sick at home and they're living right now. You talk about living in fear. They're living in fear that if they catch something and take it home, they might be the cause of death for a family member. And it's bothered me and it's hurt me to see the shaming of people. And it's not just one way or the other. The shaming goes both directions. And it's harmful to our society. It's not helpful to the community. And it's a small example of how people allow themselves to get so divided into the A or B camp and they fail to come to the middle. And what we should be doing as a community, as a church, is bringing people into the middle.
So that really makes a good point, because on all levels, the stress is up. So for safety teams, how you're going to structure your safety team is going to depend a lot on where you are and the resources that are available to you. Pastor, when we talked on the break, some of your venues you don't have a quick response of first responders, right? So if you're out there, it's going to be a little bit different in the way you're going to approach your team. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, first I'll say always a safety team should be coordinated immediately and thoroughly with all the first responders, police, medical, fire, everything else. But if you're out in the middle of nowhere in Virginia, where there's only one deputy patrolling, and you have a large congregation that comes together, you might want to structure your safety team a little bit different than something where you have an urban environment, where you have police officers on scene, that kind of thing. And give the people on your safety team options and training. Sometimes shelter in place and waiting for help to come is a good option, but if help's not coming for an hour or 40 minutes or 30 minutes or even 10 minutes, it's good to have at least something that you can go to plan B, so you can try to protect yourself and your congregation.
Great point. Great point.
With that, for this discussion, why don't we I have two more questions I think we'll cover real quick, but let's put out here any questions on that subject that you guys like to ask at this point? Is it covered?
I've got one. In a lot of churches, it seems that there can be a gap between the members on the security team and the rest of the congregation, just in terms of philosophy on security, knowledge and awareness of security. But historically, and even nowadays, we see that the church isn't a stranger to opposition, even hostile opposition. So as we as a security team are growing and learning to adapt to these new security threats, do you think that the congregation should be involved in this conversation? And if so, practically, how do you think we can go about that?
Wow, great question. Part of me says many of the people in the congregation don't want to know. They know it's out there. They come to church because they want to take time away from the week. They come in and say, my kids are in the nursery. I can sit down in the auditorium and just worship for an hour and a half, however long the service is. And in that whole aspect of balancing, welcoming while securing, I want the sheepdogs, i.e. the safety team, to make people feel safe and comfortable dropping their kids off, coming in by themselves. If they don't have kids, whatever the situation is, I want them to come in and not worry about safety and security, because we got that covered for them. Do we need to explain that to them a little bit more? I don't know. I kind of look at that and think, sometimes I don't want to know. I
people out, they think, I wonder whether someone's cooking back there, because that's what we would expect. And having your congregation at least being aware of some of the concerns that are out there in the modern world, because it is shifting and these concerns are shifting. And so I think, as everyone said so far, if people are open to having that conversation, at least open the door to that conversation.
Agreed.
And with that, on the structuring side, with this, on the safety team side, we talked about earlier, we've got people that come in, they recognize we're here, we interact with them, they're like family, we're a big family here. They know who we are, and they expect it. They know that we're not some daunting person that's out there that's armed or not armed or whatever you're doing at this point. They know they can come to us to say anything they want to, and they're not going to be persecuted or something about it. We're going to welcome that welcoming part. So that gives them the sort of a state of grace when they're coming in here. So because when I'm sitting back here and I'm doing in the auditorium and we're having service, at that point, I can tell you, how we're talking about everybody turning around when the door opens. You don't see that in our congregation. They know that we're here and we have them lifted up on that front. And that's through the security side. The other side, though, is on the emotional side. We're there for them as well, whether it be a health issue, whatever. They know they can come to us and we'll take care of it. That's all of us interact that way, and we actually train to do those services on whatever level that's needed. So that's a very important part of lifting them up. At the same time, giving them that education on living not in the green, but a step up or of the yellow stage, so that they feel safe, but they also know to say something if they see something, and they don't become that victim. Don't be the victim is another statement that's out there right now. Those things, teaching all of that is very important, both to the congregation as well as your safety team, and blending it. That's what welcoming and securing is about.
Agreed.
Is that a
Most-
good answer from it?
I'll just add one more point. Most people don't think about, terrible situations. And they did a study, and probably everybody has thought about this, and I know all the military guys and all the law enforcement have trained in this, but they did a study of people driving in a car, a driver and a passenger, and they're driving down a highway, and all of a sudden, the driver has a heart attack and falls going 70 miles an hour on the wheel of the car. 90% of the people in the passenger side in a controlled study had no idea what they should do. They kind of just folded. They went into black, and they just let the car go and crash. Now we know the mailman drill, and there's, it's not a difficult procedure to go ahead and, control that car, grab the wheel, take his foot off the accelerator, but you have to think about it, so you're not experiencing it for the first time when it's actually happening. I found that most people love that type of information. They want it. They go, wow, I never even thought of that. And you don't have to train them intensely to, you don't have to go through the military training or go through the law enforcement training and be on a speed track and actually take your seatbelt off and push the guy out of the way and slow the car down. But just having, being exposed to, here's what you do, A, B, C, D, they've thought about it. So when a bad situation happens, it's not the first time that their mind is dealing with the crisis. And I think that kind of training is good for everybody. It's just life training.
One of the things we do at Journey is every once in a while we'll practice evacuating. If, say, there's a fire, and we have to, thank goodness there's never been one in here, but say that we had a fire, one of the first things we do is evacuate our children. And so, but we tell that to the parents, we're having an evacuation drill today. And think about parents go to school. Oh, we're having a fire drill today. Okay, it's just normal. The kids evacuate. So we're doing the same thing here to say, if something happens, we want you to know we've got your kids taken care of. You can reconnect with them outside at a certain point in time when we get the all clear sounded. But that aspect him having that information is, I think, very helpful to them.
It's like teaching your kids to dial 911 or drop and roll.
Stop, drop, and roll.
Exactly. It's just building on that for other situations that are becoming more and more frequent in today's society.
Any other questions on that? It's number 2.
The next question that I would like to discuss is one, basically civilian community outreach as well as civic community outreach. And how can we build that as a more stronger bridge? And that as we're trying to build this, I've run into a little opposition trying to build that bridge. And so what I'd like to do is have an open discussion with the team that we have up here of how we can maybe build that better, because more that we can work as an interactive system, the better off we're going to be as a whole, because we need to bridge those ties and make it a stronger web to support our families throughout the communities.
Let me jump in from the church perspective just for a second. One of the things that we do, and PC mentioned the food bank, we look for organizations, we at Journey look for organizations in the community that are doing great stuff that we can partner with, either through financial support or people support, send volunteers to an organization in the name of Journey, things like that. For example, I think PC mentioned it earlier, we support the Chesterfield Food Bank on the second and fourth Monday of every month, where they will bring all the food over, we'll set it up under our front awning, and on a regular basis, we get we serve between 250, 280 families every other Monday night. And sometimes they get a lot of food depending on what donations have been to the food bank, sometimes it's less, but we still know, and we'll get 50, 75, 100 volunteers out there sometime, all with the purpose of taking care of people who are food insecure. And so we do that. We support other organizations out there like Mercy Mall that help people with who are in crisis, who've had a fire in their home, whatever. Several organizations that we partner with. But that's one of the things that we like to do is find organizations in the community that are doing great stuff, and we can come alongside them and support them either with people, finances, whatever it happens to be. But we're open. We're always open for new ideas.
I will say, as the person on this panel that's really involved with public policy, we obviously have some folks out there who are not comfortable with policing in America. And we have gone to great lengths to support our police department here in Chesterfield County. If you've not met or had the opportunity to meet Colonel Katz, I can make that happen. But we have 2 vacancies in our police department right now, 2. And I don't know of any organization in America that has 2 vacancies in their organizational ranks. We believe in having an SRO, that is a school resource officer in every school. We believe in giving our department the proper resources that it needs to do its job. And we believe that we can do policing in a way that also protects everyone's civil rights and is a balanced and just approach to policing. Imagine that, right? You don't hear about that. But we've done that. We've done that well. And we have a structure that if anybody were to ever get out of line and do something they weren't supposed to do, they'd be gone. Because that's the expectation that our colonel and his staff have set for the entire department. I'm actually leaving here today to go do an academy graduation. I will say also, we have been investing in a new program, which I'm happy to say that I'm on the founding board of the Chesterfield Police Athletic League. We are thinking about the future. We're thinking about our police department and where the men and women who make it up come from and what they look like and their backgrounds and their cultures to hopefully have it be reflective of our entire community. And we are particularly interested in building relationships so that whatever anyone has been told about our police department or its security or police in general, that we can dispel myths, that we can show people that security is a good thing, and to have trust with your department and with the men and women who work within those jobs is a good thing and something that's worth a long-term investment from all of us. Not only of public funds, but of private funds, our time on the weekends in basketball and bowling leagues. We have a bowling league right now where children in middle school and high school who have never seen a bowling ball are out chucking it next to our police officers. And it's a great thing. And over time, you wear down whatever the message has been leading up to that. You wear that down and sometimes create a brand new, beautiful relationship. That relationship building is the most important thing I think we can do looking ahead 10, 20, 30 years and where the public debate on policing is going.
Looking at resources, things have definitely changed, and many police departments, I don't know about your city here, have set up units within the detective bureaus looking to try to predict certain behaviors and try to look at indicators. The FBI's had the behavioral science unit for a long time where they're trying to predict somebody's actions and try to model the indicators of threat behavior. Private companies are doing it all over the place, and there's certain algorithms and matrix out there that these companies use. Police departments, Broward County has an outstanding program where it's community involvement. It's looking at all the different threat indicators of somebody before they commit a serious offense. It's not exact science. It's very subjective, but I would suggest that safety teams be absolutely integrated in with those units if they exist, and if they don't, encourage the city to try to at least have a section of their police department that deals with those types of complaints and indicators that can try to stop something before it happens. And a venue like this, is a perfect place where it can go both ways. It can be a two-way street. And hopefully, obviously respecting people's civil rights and not being too intrusive and keeping with the welcoming while securing theme. But it's something to consider at the very least.
To give you guys an example on a couple of things, the Virginia State Police has a SHIELD program. Have you got anybody here heard of the SHIELD program? Yeah, the SHIELD program is a program that sends notices out having to do with churches of faith, to where you get any alerts genericized, and then they'll send you, if it's happening, they send you the alert, and then they'll actually send you out a report afterwards on the incident and give you the full report on that. The Virginia State Police is one of the first statewide agencies that are doing that, and they're doing a great job at it. I've been part of it for a little while. Please Google SHIELD program for Virginia, and you can sign up. I think I've got most of our safety team on it at this point. Then I agree. Katz is a great man. I've worked with him on a couple of things. When it comes to communications and with what they have structured here, he does. He's got the no tolerance policy. If an officer does something wrong, he's gone. I know that personally from a couple of situations I've seen happen. On the other side, I've also seen where his officers use de-escalation techniques here recently, to where they took a somewhat armed assailant in, de-escalated the situation, and took him in without having to shoot him. And in normal situations, he had a gun drawn. In most cases, what would have happened? But that officer had been trained properly through the new things that Katz is putting in place to help them do de-escalation. Part of what I'd like to see is where, personally, a bridge between both what they're doing and what we can do on this side, to bridge those together to lift the community up. That's what I see really the one lacking thing that I see happening. Because it also will bring the police in to one of the things that we're trying to do, and I happen to know there's an officer from Charlottesville out there right now, that with that, Charlottesville, for example, is the exact opposite of Chesterfield to a certain extent right this second. If we can help them rebuild that community support through efforts that we're doing and showing them how to do that as a whole, both on our relationship level on the worship side as well as on the county side, that's a huge effort of training that would be a great incentive for the state side. That's where I was looking at and what I'm trying to build in this whole structure with this that we're doing. That's where I see the ministry and the structure sort of growing in a great way. That's my opinion on that. So any thoughts on that?
I would say that integrity in policing is so important, because integrity and the work that people are doing with their communities to integrate with the police departments and make sure that there's trust and faith in the police departments. Because, as a defense attorney, a lot of times people think that I don't like police officers, and I couldn't be further from the truth. Because, and I think most defense attorneys fall into this camp. If you're a defense attorney and you're defending somebody who's accused of committing a horrendous crime, you probably also don't want that person, if they committed that crime, you probably also don't want that person out roaming the streets among your family. I know, if there's somebody who committed a murder, as a father to a young son, as a husband, I don't want that murderer out in my community roaming around. I do want to make sure, though, that what the government is saying, what he's been accused of doing, is actually what happened. And so that's the job and the role of a defense attorney at times. Where I can see things really taking a wrong turn is where there are, it's a tragedy anytime that someone who is innocent is convicted, right? because the ramifications go far beyond just that incident. And it can be as silly as a speeding incident. Someone gets convicted of speeding when they weren't speeding. And if there's an integrity issue on the police side that leads to that conviction, that person who gets convicted of speeding walks out of court thinking the police are liars, the system's rigged, and why should I bother following the law because I'm just going to get convicted either way. The system doesn't work for people that look like me. And so and that's going to affect that person, and it's going to snowball from that person to their family members, to their neighbors, to everyone that they talk to. And so when a police department does a good job, you start to see the ripples, you start to see the waves go through the community where people start trusting the police. They don't feel threatened when they see a police car drive by. And likewise, when things are going wrong in a police department, you also see that in the community because the community lacks trust. And so it's really critical that your elected officials, that the people in positions of power care about this because it will affect over years the entire community.
It's so true. When I was a police officer in New Jersey, one of my sergeants, Sergeant Acacello, he had a very strong Jersey accent. But, as a police officer, you may be involved in 6 or 7 traffic stops a day, 30 service calls. And for you, those interactions are a routine, right? But for every person that you come in contact with as a police officer, that is going to be the only thing they talk about. Probably all that day, the week, they're going to tell all their friends, they're going to recount the situation, and if it's not a positive interaction, it's going to even be worse. They'll talk about it for years. My dad used to talk about being stopped by a police officer. He was definitely wrong. He blew through a stop sign, but he never stopped talking about it. And I would submit that it's the same for these safety teams. You're going to be out here and you're going to deal with 3 or 4 situations every day. But if it's not handled with discretion and handled in a way where it's welcoming, it's going to be the only thing those people are going to talk about.
And they're not going to come back to the church if they didn't have a good feeling.
No,
Exactly, which is what we want to prevent. I want to highlight a couple things that I know Colonel Katz has done. Some of these may have been carried from his predecessor, but the National Night Out and the participation of the Chesterfield officers and Chesterfield force with all the National Night Out. We partner with a couple of apartment complexes right here behind us every year to participate in that, and it's always great to see the Chesterfield officers be able to come out there and partner with us for that, as well as we get some of the supervisors out there at times as well. And then the Worship Watch is something else that Chief Katz has had going, and that is a chance where they bring houses of faith together. And with the police force, Corporal Tim Lamb is the one who I think is running it there. And at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, they'll come together and say, let's talk about what's going on in the community. And they get all the houses of worship that are willing to come in or able to come in to the technical center down here and just give us a heads up, a brief on what's been happening locally and things that we need to be aware of as a church, as houses of faith, so that we can better serve our congregations. And also, I love the aspect of being able to just help with the police that much more.
And it's good OPSEC for you all.
Absolutely.
You know what's going on.
Good, absolutely.
And the FBI is doing that here recently. They've started doing virtual briefings, hour-and-a-half briefings. I think they're going to do 1 a quarter, I think is what they're looking at from that structure. I was trying to get to where we could do it a little more in person because of the interaction side and the training piece of it. But that's part of what I meant by trying to bridge everybody together. If we could get like CATS, the FBI, the state police, the private community all working together as one, then our web is that much stronger. We're able to lift it up. We're not having those things slip through the cracks, and we're catching them better. We're educating the populace better so that we can actually lift everybody up. That's where I see we need to be heading as a whole. That's just an opinion, but that's mine. Yeah. All right, third question.
Okay. I'm sorry. Any questions? I'm sorry. Any questions from y'all attending on anything that we've said so far?
I tend to keep answering them before they get asked.
We're trained in that.
While we're at it, gentlemen, I live way out west in Augusta County.
Yeah.
And I'd like to invite you all to church Sunday. I have an elder board I'd love for you to meet and speak to.
I can send the recording to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
video.
But we'll,
In all seriousness, thank you.
You're welcome.
on the third question, what I was looking at is basically back on the community side and where we're going is lifting things up, is right now with what's happened with COVID and then the changes since 9/11, if you look at the dynamics of the hits that have happened and what we're trying to do, what steps, we've covered some of those, what steps should we be pushing forward to lift this up and build the community using the house of worship and the safety teams to build those?
Well, I think an easy answer is resources. You talk about the food bank, you talk about helping people, and we've all talked in one manner or another about people that are struggling right now. And the church, and I'm reminded of some of the parables, and the church has an opportunity to help people that are in need. And that can be not only a helping hand, but it can be the hook that brings somebody into this network and gets them connected with their faith, and that's going to change their life, and that's going to have internal and eternal effects. So I think that's really, really important, is how can the church offer a helping hand? How can the church be a resource?
I think there's sitting here pondering, we have an opportunity always to connect through relationship building. I do see that as a huge function. Not only can the local government be a convener of opportunities for those relationships to occur, like through Police Athletic League, but can also partner with the worship community. You mentioned Worship Watch, and that could be built on as well. So I look at that. We certainly want to be communicating as well. I think that OPSEC is really important, and that's something that, let's face it, as a church community or somebody in a private sector, you're just not going to have access to some of this information in terms of knowing what's going on. I mean, you read the newspaper and things like that. I want to put the newspaper in quotations, or maybe the news part of that. But there's information that could be shared probably more sometimes, but you start going down that road, it becomes very touchy with folks. So, but I do think that's the direction all of this is headed: is local government and the church community working more on these things, as we've worked so strongly with schools over the last, I would say, 5-7 years, really to just get our local system in a place where we have atriums, we have cameras, we have all of these physical barriers, and then we've also kept the human resource component in there and added technology to boot. I'm sure it's no surprise to many of you, these apps that you can get on your phone immediately if something happens and alert law enforcement or the 911 center to get responses. So those are also good tools. But I don't think we could do enough in the area of relationship building and communication.
Yeah, I mean, that's, more seminars like this, more conferences like this, and I agree, there's nothing that replaces interpersonal relationships and meeting somebody in person. Most of the good work here at this conference is going to be done in the hallway, on the breaks, drinking coffee, where you can actually talk to somebody in an informal setting, and that's what I would stress. The more you can get people together, even with the crazy times we have now with COVID, moving towards that's the best way to further relationships and get things done.
Agreed. 100% agree with that. I know that, Mike, to your last comment, given the choice of Zoom or face-to-face, I'll do face-to-face every time. And it's not to denigrate Zoom. Zoom's a great capability. I can have a conference call with my sister on the West Coast if I need to and see face-to-face interaction there. But in-person interaction, in my mind, is the best every time, because it gives you, like PC said earlier, gives you the ability to read a person's body posture, read their face, and see how they're doing. Somebody say, "I'm fine." Really? I could not have guessed, But having to be able to look at them and say, "How can we help you? What can we do to help you? How can we make things better for you? Can we reference you to somebody? Can we put you in touch with community authorities who can help in a specific area if it's not an area that we can help with. So multiple areas out there, face-to-face interaction will always, I think, be the best form that we can do, and the conferences that we can have, and just exchanging ideas. Even exchanging ideas on Zoom can be a great thing at times, or via live stream, just so that we have more interaction and a better opportunity to get ideas from other people. Because we don't claim to be the fount of all ideas by any stretch of the imagination. The community can't be the fount of all ideas. It's a collective partnership working together that's going to help us raise a stronger community and keep people coming to the churches and so they can hear the Word of God.
Any questions on this subject? We're looking at our time at this point as well, so.
Yep.
I think, then, thank you guys. We gotta get ready back to the.
Well, let me,
And thank
Mike
you, everybody.
and Chris and Gilbert and PC, thank you for being here. Thanks for giving us time out of your schedule today. I know you're all busy, but thank you for being here with us today.
Appreciate it.
And helping us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.